Okay, we will go ahead and get started here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. My name is Jamie Staten, and I'm the Family Engagement Specialist here at TRECA. And tonight we have a special presenter from the Marion Crawford Prevention Programs, Mrs. Christy Eckert, and she's going to be leading us through these topics. We are recording this session for those unable to attend the live session, so we will have that available. Believe we may have time for questions and answers throughout, but when you're not speaking, you will want to keep your microphone muted so we don't get a bunch of feedback or static. And you can use the chat function, or when we have time for questions, you can unmute yourself and ask the question at that time. So Christy, I will go ahead and turn it over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Welcome everybody. My name's Christy, and I do work for Marion Crawford Prevention Programs. We're an agency in Marion County that works actually in Marion and Crawford counties, but we primarily focus on youth prevention, so substance use prevention, teaching young people to make healthy choices and be strong leaders, and also teaching them to encourage their peers and friends to do the same. So it's called Peer-Led Prevention. And then I also lead a drug-free coalition in both Marion and Crawford counties to help support those efforts. So we have really strong peer-led prevention in those two counties, but to allow us to teach parents how to kind of reinforce those things. So I'm really excited to share this Parenting for Prevention presentation with you all. It is, like Jamie said, please feel free to ask questions. If at any time you have a question, maybe type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute, I think the group's small enough that that's fine. Or at the end, I will obviously, or as well, open it up for questions. But, so we'll just go ahead and get started. So, as a parent, things are always changing, and it's really, really hard to know how to keep up with things. And as a parent, our goal is always to keep our young ones safe. So, but sometimes we don't even always have the knowledge around that. So this is just going to give you some tips how to start conversations and things you can do at different age points. I know some of you may have younger children, and we're going to focus on every age group tonight. So please know we're going to cover all of that. So if my mouse will let me move forward. So parenting is hard. I assume most of you would agree with that. And in different stages of life, it just gets harder. I thought when my kids got older, it would get easier, but that's not the case always. There's bigger and scarier things that are facing our kids. So it is scary, and it's hard. And it's, again, like I said earlier, it's hard to keep up with everything. So how can we and what can we do to keep them safe and get them safely to adulthood, and then also to create productive, healthy, strong adults? So, like I said, keeping our kids safe. We do a lot of different things to keep our kids safe. When they're little, we put them in seat belts. We have them wear helmets when they ride their bikes. We immunize them, and a variety of different other things to keep them safe. But and those are all wonderful, but there's also a process of, building a relationship with your child and building, having good conversations with them. But again, that's really tricky. So again, we're going to talk about how do we talk about some of the tough stuff? What do we say? When do we say it? So we're going to really kind of focus on that. So when we're talking in the younger kids, here's just some tips. So we know that when kids are little, oftentimes they see news and they're confused if they see news. So one thing we talk about with prevention is kind of limiting what young people that age 2 to 6, it's also that age where it's like, why, what, why? They ask lots of questions, but limiting exposure to certain things is really kind of smart at that 2 to 6 range. they don't have enough life experience to really kind of put things in perspective. And when you're talking about complex, difficult topics, they just don't have enough information to grasp those things. So when they're little, kind of keep that information from them, not deceptively, but don't share that. Be mindful of your conversations around your children, and just, kind of use your best judgment. Reassure with both words and gestures. So at that age, again, that 2 to 6, a lot of times their primary family unit, their caregivers, and maybe siblings, if they're siblings or other family members in the house, are their only, that's basically the center of their world. They don't have a lot of outside influences. And so if something scary does happen, or they do encounter something scary, reassuring them both with your words and saying, it's going to be okay, we're going to keep you safe, and also gestures, and giving them, providing them comfort. Again, because at that age, that's how they process things. When you're dealing with that age group too, addressing feelings, yours and theirs. Even though they are young and don't have a lot of experiences, they are pretty perceptive, and they see if you're agitated, they know that, and that does rub off on them. So if you're in a situation that's uncomfortable, do your best to keep yourself calm, to in turn keep your child calm, so they don't feel scared. And then also it's okay to ask them, what do you know? When they see or something, or there's a situation, ask them, what have you heard about this? Or what do you know? Or how did you hear that? And make sure when you're conversing about that you keep it in very simple terms. Don't necessarily skirt the issue, but keep the information as simple as possible. Be sure to catch your own bias and kind of limit your opinions, but just stay with facts. Because oftentimes when we get into our opinions, we get into emotions again, and that can be very confusing for a young child. So keep it just to the facts. Also, reassuring a child that someone's in charge. Say you're watching the news and your child walks in and war has broken out. Communicate to them that there are leaders in place that, are watching and are keeping watch over us and guiding people to make decisions. But again, let them know someone's in charge. If it would be something at school that was, or school or at a church or family function that's scary, let them know someone's in charge, or an adult is taking care of that. And then at the end of their day, ask them about their day. I think it's really important to start those conversations as early as you can. Hey, one of my favorites is, what was the worst part of your day today? You could gain a lot of information from that. And then I always like to end on the positive and say, what was the best part of your day? And it's funny because, a lot of times it's their lunchtime or the snack they had when they're little or whatever that might be. But again, they'll often tell you about people that they come in contact with that might be, antagonizing them, or maybe kids that you don't want them to be around because they're telling you things that they're doing that might not be the healthiest choices. But starting that young with your kids is really great. And I do want to express, though, if it's not something you've done in the past, it doesn't mean you can't begin that at a later date. But if you can start those conversations and relationships young, as they get older, they're going to be more likely to come to you and talk with you about these things because you have had conversations. Yes, it might be a bigger conversation as they're older, but they know that they've had conversations with you in the past, and they can build, they know that you're a safe person to have those conversations with. So let's see. So when we get to that little older age, this gets a little trickier because these individuals, first off, they're able to read. They can read and write things. They are exposed to a lot more age inappropriate things. If there are older siblings in the house, that age range from that 2 to 6 up to that 7 to 12 is a big jump. So, the things that 12-year-olds talk about is very different from what 6, 5, and 6-year-olds talk about. So, it's important to be aware of that, and to remember that they do get exposed to some different things through other people, whether it's, out at gymnastics, or if they go to a church, the Sunday school, or, they can be exposed to different things. You can also see with older kids, because they can read. I remember standing at the grocery line with my kids, and once they could read the headlines of all the different magazines or whatever, sometimes questions come about there. So remembering what they're really able to see and hear, and what they can read is a big thing. As they get older, they do develop some of those more abstract thinking skills and more real life experience, and they also are better able to express themselves. And so they are a little more able to, deal with or grapple with different things. I do encourage waiting for the right moment. If something hasn't presented itself, you don't necessarily have to bridge that until you're getting closer to that moment. For instance, or again with the news, if they see something in the news and they're asking, then that's when you might want to deal with it. Or if you've heard them talking with friends or someone else about certain things, then certainly it might be time to discuss some of these things, whether it could be around, sex, mental health, substance use, any of those things. Because as we're getting close to that age of 12, that's when we do see some experimentation, especially with substance use and experimentation. Again, find out what they know. A lot of times at this age, I laugh because they think they know stuff, but then when you do actually ask, they really don't have any idea. So, find out if you do hear discussions with someone else and they say something, later on. Don't do it in a space where their friends are around and they might feel awkward. That kind of goes along with the next step, to create a safe space for discussions. Make sure it's a one-on-one or a comfortable space that they don't feel ganged up on when you're asking, but also that they don't feel embarrassed when you're asking around people, their peers. But find out what they do know, and really, kind of try to provide context and perspective. A lot of times, if their emotions get involved, they can't keep it kind of composed. If they're scared, it can kind of get out of control. So understanding, like trying to provide context and say, this is very far away, or this is happening elsewhere. Again, reassure that someone's in control and provide them with perspective. Being sensitive to their emotions is really important. Again, they're little brains, but their brains do not fully develop, honestly, until about 25. So the part that's the rational part of our brain does not develop until we're well into adulthood. So oftentimes their emotions and their tempers can get the best of them. So understanding that, they might kind of blow off the handle a little bit, but give them a little bit of time to process, and yourself to process. And be real sensitive to their emotions. Encourage critical thinking. Basically when we say that, we just kind of, say, kind of look at the perspective. So again, and I'm using this example a lot, in like war, if something's, on the TV, have them think about it. This is this far away. It's this far away. We're safe here where we are right now, that kind of thing. And then also look at positives. It's important to reassure them if it's a news thing, maybe if they're confronted with something, a substance, like at that higher age range at 12, somebody approaches them at school and they do turn it down. Looking at the positives and saying, I know it was scary to you and I know maybe you got in trouble or whatever, but I'm really proud of you for doing this, or kind of just constantly encouraging positive thinking and always encouraging a silver lining and always encouraging them to be optimistic. And, if it is something that's, like an event, maybe say, a lot of people, they acted like heroes today, or let's find ways that we can help. Oftentimes at this age, if you hear about like national disasters or hurricanes or things like that, people get scared. Tornadoes, there have been some tornadoes recently. Just kind of giving them, there are people on the way to help, giving them that kind of perspective. And again, find out what they know and how much they can process. So once you're hitting that teenage years, there's that possibility of them really looking at different, different things. You might be dealing with like maybe some internet searches, and we're going to touch on at the end, talking a little bit about social media. With the internet these days, there's so much that's at our kids' fingertips, ours and our kids. So, when you're dealing with pornography or alcohol, or different, YouTube videos about mental health, there is so much available to them. So again, talking with them and encouraging open dialogue. If you have started that open dialogue at that early age, this definitely makes this teenage age much easier. And encouraging the talk. And sometimes when the initial talk starts, they might be a little reluctant, but as they start to relax and communicate with you, and also see that you're not judging them by them talking about it, that's imperative. And I think that things will relax and that open dialogue will come. I'm sure all of you have experienced that. How was your day? Good. Or did you have a good day? Yes. That yes, no questions. So when you are talking to your teens, give them open-ended questions. Like I said, you can even still use that. What was the best part of your day? Or, who was the person who annoyed you the most today? I don't know, whatever it is that you think would relate with them, but asking them questions where they can't just say yes or no. Because honestly, we all know teenagers that they're going to give us as little information as possible from the get-go. But again, if they've been communicating with you through the years, it might make it easier. I'm not going to say it's going to fix everything, because a lot of times they're still going to act like teenagers and they're going to give you those yes, no answers. But if they're used to that communication with you, they're more likely to share. The next one, admit when you don't know. This is really, really important. And, like I said, if it comes down to like drug use or whatever, or different substances, a lot of times these things change constantly, and what our kids are getting exposed to changes constantly. So if you do not know the answer when they're asking you questions, just be honest. Say, you know what, I do not know that, but you know what, let's find out. And maybe it's something that you do together. They aren't as likely to, do the fun things that the little ones like, let's do a craft or whatever. But there are certainly ways that you could find and maybe even show them good places to find out information online. But it is okay to say, you know what, I'm not sure. But don't just drop it there. Just say, but I will find out, or let's find out together. The next one, get them to consider the complexities that, forces when you're talking about different social issues and stuff, understanding that, if in government, it's a lot bigger and it takes a lot more people to get involved. So I think that's the best way to really explain that. Difficult subjects that maybe we don't have as much control over. I think that's important to express that to them. When you're talking your values, it's important to let your children know where you stand with certain issues, with all issues. And I think it's important to share that and then let them decide how they're going to react to that. But I think it's very important for them to understand where you sit and where you stand. We always talk about with specifically with substance use. Saying to your child, I expect that you will not use substances while you're a young person, and you won't consume alcohol until you're of legal age. That's an expectation, and I expect that. That's part of your value system. It's not, oh, I hope you will not do that. No, I expect this. These are our rules, and these are the consequences that happen if you break our rules. So sharing your values and your rules with your teens is very important, because I've come in contact with a lot of kids that have told me, actually, I had a senior in high school one day that said, I wish my mom knew where I was and told me what she expected from me. And that just blew me away. I mean, she was 18 years old and kind of, really at the cusp of adulthood. And she heard a conversation with me and my child, and that was the comment she said. And I thought that was very telling. As much as our teens act like they do not want us involved in their lives, they do want structure, they do want guidance, and they need it. And so it's really important to share your values and your rules with them from the get-go. Talking about their news, it's kind of hard to always, again, like I said, keep up with your kids, but, be aware of where they find their news. Is this something that comes from, Instagram or Snapchat? If you're not on those social media sites, I do encourage you to at least find out how they work. Snapchat is one that we won't go into that too much. I think we do talk on some social media stuff, but there's a lot out there, and their news is presented to them very differently. So at least be aware of that. I always tell parents to, try to be aware of the lingo of the day. What does what mean? And again, that's really hard to do. And sometimes I know when my kids were younger, I would ask them and then they'd make fun of me because I didn't know, but at least I knew what they were talking about. So being aware of their news, how they receive their news, and the wording and the different lingo and their conversation, how they interact is very important. And then I think it's important to ask them how they would handle things. A lot of times we have already given our kids these tools to handle the situation appropriately. And maybe it's just they're insecure in making those decisions, but also when you ask them what they would do, that gives them some power and makes them feel like you do trust them. And there's going to be times when we trust our kids and maybe times we don't. But again, when we work through this process and, find out what they know or what they would do, it gives us a lot of opportunities to teach and a lot of teaching moments. And then also getting them to consider solutions. And like I said, if you maybe set that standard, I expect that you will not use substances, and something happens that you find out they did. And, you can say, well, you had consequences. And so what do you think we should do about this? And a lot of times the kids will say, well, the consequence was this, so I suppose that's what I should do. Again, teens don't ever want to be completely free and unstructured. They act like they do, but when they're surveyed, they always want to know that you care, that you're checking in, that you're guiding them, and they do crave that structure. Actually, all of us as humans do. So, but getting them involved in the process and talking with them and how would they handle certain situations is important. So for instance, if you hear one of their friends got in trouble and you'll say, kind of say, well, what were your thoughts about this? What did they think? Because they might say, I was really disappointed in my friend because they did this, because then it backfired on our basketball team or whatever. So a lot of times just asking them how to consider the solutions and asking them what they would do. There's a lot of power in that for that teenage group. So when you're beginning, and again, it's ideal to start when they're little, but don't ever think that because you didn't, that you can't begin at any time. Using teachable moments. So hypothetically, or, maybe there's a story that breaks on the news about a famous star who was admitted to a mental hospital or for addiction treatment. Asking them, especially if it's one that's been in the news a lot or it's a very popular young person, asking them their thoughts on that and talking about that. And then again, like we said about reinforcing the positives, saying, well, if this person is struggling, at least they're reaching out and seeking help to get themselves healthy. Laying the groundwork early, just like I said, the earlier you can start this, the better, because that keeps that line of communication open. And it encourages that conversation as they get older. Again, I know when they're younger, it's a lot easier to talk about some of this stuff. But when they get older, if you have had those conversations, they are going to be more likely to come to you if they know of a situation or if they personally are in a situation. Sometimes being non-judgmental and just listening, oftentimes when our kids make mistakes, sometimes we jump the gun and, we're angry and we're screaming and we're punishing or whatever, which I understand it's scary, but, being non-judgmental and just listening, what happened, because sometimes, maybe your kid was the one that wasn't doing the things and was actually helping someone, or who knows, but it's really important to be non-judgmental and to just listen. So what could you do if these role playing, this is a great thing to have in place and to share with people. What would you do if you were approached by someone for this, and sharing those role plays? And there's a variety of websites that we could share later if you're interested in stuff like that helps you walk through those role plays, the conversations. Also, and I don't think I mentioned this later, for your kids, having some sort of code word, it's really important to do. If they're, even as a little kid, if they maybe go to a sleepover at a friend's house and something makes them uncomfortable there, it's important to, have a way for them to share with you that they're uncomfortable, and then you can go get them. So maybe it's, hi mom, I'm sorry, but I forgot to feed the dog or whatever. Then, mom can call and say, hey, I'm coming to get you. And then if the friend sees that your text or whatever, then the friend just thinks that you're in trouble because you didn't feed the dog. But, maybe, or I left the ice cream out of the fridge, whatever that code word or code phrase is, the parent or the guardian could call that individual and say, hey, I'm coming to get you because you, whatever, almost like you're in trouble. But again, you want them to have a way out of situations that are uncomfortable for them. Driving in the car or fixing dinner. Those are really great ways to start these conversations. Sometimes if they're maybe doing homework while you're cooking dinner, you can have conversations, or, taking them to practice or driving to the grocery store. These are great opportunities to have conversations. And we always tell parents that you don't need to spend like one big hour sharing information with your kids. You want to plant those conversations just in tidbits. So, again, if you're driving home from school and or driving home from practice or whatever, and someone says, well, so-and-so got in trouble today because he brought alcohol to school. And you can start that conversation there and have that then and there. But again, those smaller conversations are where the real work actually happens. So again, with prevention, talk about it. talk about substance, especially around substance use. I think it's very important to remember, we have a lot of data that proves that if there is a family history of substance use or abuse, that it is more likely that your child or you would develop a use disorder. So being very honest, when they're younger, I think it's important for them to just know that there are people in the family that have struggled. As they get older, they may know that person because they may have experienced it, or I think it's as they get a little older, it's a little easier to tell them who. Sometimes you have to be careful. You want to be careful because you don't ever want your child to judge that person, especially if maybe they are in recovery and, living healthy life now. It's confusing when they see them healthy, but to imagine them in a different way. So, but I think it's very important to talk about that family history. It's very important to talk about the harms of drugs and alcohol. Our agency is very big on educating and explaining why, because their brain is not developed until 25, every time a young person uses a substance, it actually changes the makeup of their brain. And this is stuff that we've just learned over the last 10 or 15 years. And so it actually also primes their brain for addiction. I'm a geek kind of like this. If you watch brain scans of a young person consuming alcohol, as opposed to an old person consuming alcohol with a developed brain, the brain lights up differently in those two brains because the developing brain responds differently. And we always tell young people, your brains are amazing. You guys can learn things way quicker than us older people because that's the way you were made. But but they also, that amazing brain can be harmed very easily as well. So understanding that is very important. Not allowing your child to use even with you, that is a huge piece of prevention. That not even giving them sips, that's encouraging use. So set the standard and say, no, you're not going to. That's our rule, and this. Understanding as they get older that you need to monitor where they're going, who they're going with, and what they're doing. It is okay for a parent to call ahead and say, hey, especially if you don't know the family, if your child's maybe going to sleepover, birthday party or something that you're not at. It is not outside the realm to call that parent and, thank them for the invitation, but to say, hey, who all will be there? Will there be monitoring of this? Especially when you're talking like teenage parties, maybe after a home, after some event, making sure who's there. And the thing is, if you started these conversations early with your kids, you're going to know the kids that you don't want your kids to be around and the ones you do want your kids to be around. And so, if you know that, I don't know, Joey Jones is somebody you don't want your kid around, and your kid says, oh yeah, we're going over to so-and-so's house and Joey Jones will be there. Well, then maybe that's when you say, nope, you're not going there. But again, it is your job to know that. And there's nothing wrong with calling and asking, what will this party be like? What will this event be like? Will there be adults drinking around, these kids? Will they be seeing that? Is there, are people going to be acting responsibly? So we do know too that kids who know that their parents would not approve of something are less likely to use. So we do surveys every couple of years in Marion County. And when we ask kids, how likely do you think your parents would disapprove of this? And does that impact you? And they do say yes, even though we know we've talked to teenagers and they act like they don't care what we think. They really do. And they do listen. And if you have those conversations, and continuously, and again, it's not that a big hour-long discussion, but just tidbits of, hey, this is not something I want for you because I want this for you. And we know that this can harm this. And, constantly having those conversations, they know that their parents don't approve, and that does influence them. I mentioned this earlier, but is it a hope or an expectation? You know, you don't say, oh, I hope you won't, drink alcohol before you're of age, or I hope you won't. No, in my house, my expectation is that you will not use alcohol or drugs, and you will, make safe, healthy choices, to give you the best opportunities in life. Oops, sorry, I clicked too far there. All right, here we go. So we talked a little bit, I mentioned the internet and safety, and I have attended so many different workshops. I actually was at a school mental health conference last week in New Orleans, and they had some really great information around being cautious with technology, cyber safety, and years ago, it was just if you had a computer or a laptop or a desktop at your home that you could access the internet. Now we have these amazing smartphones that are just little mini computers in the palm of our hand. And I remember one of the presenters I've seen in the past couple years, she said, when we teach our kids to drive a car, we require them to go through a number of classes, whether that be online or in person. We require them to drive a certain number of hours with an adult. Then they have to drive with a skilled adult. Then they have to take a test, and we do all these things to keep them safe in a car. But we hand them a cell phone at the age of 8 and give them no rules and restrictions. And that was very powerful to me, because there are more harms in that technology than ever in a car. So keeping updated, understanding what risks are out there. A number of area schools have had a speaker, Jessie Weinberger. She came and she surveyed kids and was asking them the different things they use. And many of them had said things like they had been approached by older people to meet up with them. And we're talking middle school and younger age. So understanding what is out there. How can your kids communicate? Is it through Snapchat? What are the different websites to be cautious of? Do you know their passwords? And why or why not? You should always have access to that. That should always be given to you. Checking phones and their computer. Basically, if you're paying for that phone, it is your property, not theirs. And setting that standard and making them aware of that and saying, I can check that at any given time because that is mine. And a lot of people will say, well, that's their privacy. Excuse me. But this isn't like we're reading their diary or anything. Online posts are open for the whole world to see. And our youth believe that, like with Snapchat, that on Snapchat, once they send it, it's gone. Well, that's not true. I mean, you can ask any police officer. All of that information can be retrieved if ever there's a case. So understanding that, online posting and being out there online is way, way different than, writing in your own personal diary or journal. This isn't a matter of privacy. It's a matter of safety. So being aware of where they go, where they visit, what they do, and being able to access that at all times. You can set certain restrictions, when they download apps. But if they're free apps, you might not get those notifications. So you could set that, your settings on different electronics. So you always get a setting if something, or always get a notification if anything's downloaded. Another thing to keep in mind is watch what you post. Be cognizant of how you react and act on social media, because again, you're setting the standard for your young person. So watch how you react, because they're going to copy and could copy you a lot. So watch what you post. And please understand that this continues to be new territory for everyone. Even in our work, we oftentimes get information from different agencies or whatever, and we're always hearing of new things. There were TikTok challenges a few years ago that were causing a lot of safety issues to kids, and being aware of those kinds of things. And it is hard to keep up on that, but there are some websites, and our agency and our Facebook pages for our coalitions, we try to give information to parents and families so they know what to watch for, and to try to help you with that, because again, it is really tricky and confusing. So again, when you're talking about cyber responsibility, what setting your expectations, saying, I expect you will not use this this site. Again, I'll be checking to make sure. And maybe you follow them or friend them on those sites so you can see what they're posting. I know with Instagram, there was a time where everybody had a Finsta account. And I remember my husband saying, what is that? And they're like, well, it's a fake Instagram account. Well, what's that? That's only for your most private friends. Okay. Again, if you're on something, the parent needs to be aware. Have a sliding scale of severity that guides how you act. So, recognizing that kids are, again, that piece of the brain is not developed. They are going to make stupid choices. We all did, they all will. But understanding that, still there might be consequences even with that less severe choice, or with those severer choices, we might have to have some, greater consequence. Never ever want to, when you're on any sort of social media, call out someone else. If a child or another kid, if you are monitoring that online presence, don't call out someone on the social media. Maybe touch base with them, especially if, I think we talk about this a lot. It takes a village to raise kids. And if you have friends that have kids in that similar age group and someone would find something out, we need to be sharing that information with each other and telling each other. And even at that younger age, if there's situations at school where so-and-so might be bullying someone, but, somebody's not telling, it's okay to confront and talk calmly about these issues. But don't do that in a social media setting or call out someone online. Again, watching what you post, be cognizant of how you represent yourself. I know in some of these surveys that I've read, kids get bothered when parents post about them. They don't like it. It's different for them. And I think that was very surprising to me. So being cognizant of what your child wants and what they expect. If they don't want you posting things about them, then, maybe respect that and don't do that. And just remind them that whatever they say in that world of internet and social media technology cannot be taken back. It's not, oh, I was just joking, just kidding. No, that's not the way it works out there. Once it's out there, it is out there forever. And so understanding that, you can't take those things back. So it's just very important to share that with them. Educating your kids around, again, social media. Everyone isn't who they say they are online. Catfishing, we've heard that term recently. Someone, pretending to be someone they aren't, and understanding what that means. So many times, and I love that our kids can be very accepting of others, but again, they have to be cautious of others. And when you're talking about a catfish, that's somebody who's pretending to be someone they aren't. And so explaining that and talking with them about, on these social media sites, you can be very anonymous but there's still ways of finding out who you are, and there are still people out there who are dishonest. And so if it seems kind of odd or off, then it probably is. So having those conversations, and again, if you were ever approached as a parent, being non-judgmental and, helping them process through this and understand this. let's see, like we talked about, nothing ever goes away ever. It's always out there. And there's no such thing as being anonymous. It always can be discovered online who that person is. And again, things aren't always as innocent as they appear. And again, like I said, kids, we love that they have that a little bit of naive to them, but understanding that it's not always that innocent. So keeping those things in mind and sharing that with your kid is imperative when you're talking about social media, etc. So with all of this that we've kind of talked about, it's just really imperative to set rules and consequences. Tell them, if you're up after 9 o'clock on your phone, then this is the rule. The phone will be taken away, and this is your consequence. Setting limits. Last week when I was at that school mental health conference, the lady had us look at our phone usage for the week and how many hours we were on it. And it was amazing to me, so many people, how many hours per day that we were on our phones. And you can see that, and you can see what you were on as well. We were traveling, so some of my younger coworkers were making fun of me because I had our travel apps. They were the ones I had used the most in the last few hours and days because that's how we traveled. But understanding, that the usage, you set the example. Setting limits, maybe sometimes we have to kind of look at our own actions and set limits for ourselves. And sometimes that's okay too, to share with your child. Hey, I've realized I'm on my phone a lot. I'm gonna kind of try to put it down here and experience life here or whatever. So and then clearly communicating what those rules and expectations are. Don't just have them in your head and then set them up to fail. You're giving them these rules and the consequences, and then you're allowing them to make choices. Part of our learning and growing as young people is our choices and the consequences that happen from them. So understanding that these rules have been clearly communicated, this is what I expect. And if you don't follow through, these are the consequences. But then giving them the opportunity to make the choice. Monitoring the rules, monitoring all of that, and then keeping track and taking notes. It is important to remember too, just because your kid says they're not going to do something or they agree to something during that initial conversation, does not mean that they will stop doing it or does not mean that they won't do it. So again, setting those limits, firm consequences, and then sticking to it. Don't be wishy-washy about, oh, well, I know that this time you did. No, we set these rules, we set these consequences, and this is what's going to happen. And if we stick to it and we're not wishy-washy with it, ultimately it will be easier for them to learn how their choices affect their life. And again, ultimately, I always told my kids, my job is not to be your friend, but to keep you safe. And so understanding that is very important. And sometimes I know as a parent, it can be really hard to stick to those guns, but our goal is to keep them safe. We want them to still remain here. So here's just a variety of warning signs and symptoms that your young person might be involved in either something risky or maybe even involved in using substances. I'm just going to hit a couple of these. The bad thing I will say is some of these actions, signs, and symptoms are also the signs of moody teenager. So we see that a lot, if they're secretive with their phone calls, they lock their doors, they break curfew often. That one might be a little bigger red flag. If they're going through cash a lot, that might be something. But some of these different options, if they're going out every night, that could be a sign. If they've changed relationships, that's one of the first big ones we see if a youth is using substances. They might be changing friends. Their friend circle might change because maybe they're doing things that their other friends wouldn't want them to do or wouldn't do, or they might be removing themselves from certain family members, or maybe they're connecting with older family members because like an older sibling might be buying them alcohol. So being aware in that kind of realm is very important. But again, a variety of different signs and symptoms to be careful of. Mood is a different one. Again, that's very much moody teenager. They could be hyper, they could be hostile. We know that mood swings in teen years, especially for females sometimes, emotional instability. But again, if you're seeing some of those that first page of signs, then you're seeing one or two of the mood personality, and then maybe you're seeing some appearance or hygiene problems. The more signs you're seeing, the more likely there is something going on. And, it is okay to, investigate, to watch, to check, to see what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with that. But keeping track of what they're doing and seeing any changes in behavior, moods, or appearance is imperative. Health issues that you might see, frequent sickness, depression, different things like that. If with school concerns, if they're skipping school or not logging in or loss of interest, I mean, you know your kid best. If your kid loved to, do homework or do this, and all of a sudden they're not interested, then that's certainly a change for your behavior. If you're seeing any sort of substances missing alcohol, medication, even prescription or over-the-counter medication, it's a good idea to start when they're young. They have to ask you for medication, or if they're sick when they're little, they come to you and you give them the medication. It's still not a bad idea to at least be aware when they're using medication, even if it's just over-the-counter ibuprofen or Tylenol. So understanding that if you ever would suspect your child is doing something risky or concerning, there are a variety of options to get help and to guide you. Websites, you can type in, how do I protect my kids from this or that? And we're a local agency that provides quite a few opportunities. We do a number of parent programming things similar to this, but even there's some hands-on ones. We did do our Hidden in Plain Sight at an event for TRECA at the beginning of the year, and that was very well received. But again, understanding that there is help out there if you would need it. So here are a few websites that I really like that are great for talking about substance use and setting standards. The Talk They Hear You is a campaign. It's a national campaign that our coalitions use. And it just gives you tips, again, reinforcing how to have conversations, how to have tricky conversations, things that you can ask, role plays that you can do. But these 3 sites are really wonderful for all different areas of prevention. So there's always opportunity. So I'm a talker. I'm sorry I took a lot of that time, but if you have anybody has questions, I'd be very willing to answer anything or try to help in any way. So